My name is Claire Donovan. I'm a pediatrician living in Boston, and I was the bride left behind on her wedding night. Not a few days before the ceremony, not at the altar, but in the middle of the reception in front of 200 guests, still wearing a wedding dress with visible fold lines. My husband Zachary received a message, went pale, looked at me one last time and said, "I have to go." He walked away as if the wedding had never happened. I stood there, alone, amid the music, the clinking of glasses, and the well-wishes still hanging in the air. Have you ever been left behind in the exact moment you thought you were happiest? If you have, share it with me in the comments. If you haven't, stay. There's more to come. Hit like and follow the channel so you won't miss more stories that cut straight to the heart. Because what I have to tell you isn't only about a marriage that fell apart. It's about a truth I spent 5 years, and one death, to finally face. I met Zachary on a fall morning in the lobby of Boston City Hospital, where coffee cost twice as much and sleep was the rarest luxury for a second-year resident like me. I had just finished a 36-hour shift, eyes blurry, head spinning, fumbling with a cup of hot coffee. I treated like the only thing keeping me upright that morning. And then I bumped into him. The coffee spilled across his expensive white shirt, staining the front brown. I froze, stammered out an apology, dug through my bag for napkins, but he chuckled and spoke first. Doctors should get more sleep. Then he pulled out a handkerchief from his own pocket, handed it to me, and added, as if he couldn't care less about the stain, "But if you're planning to attack someone with caffeine again, maybe go for a cheaper shirt next time." I laughed. Zachary wasn't like any man I'd met before. He wasn't pushy, he wasn't flashy. Because this story isn't only about being left behind. I declined, politely but firmly. I was exhausted. My heart and mind had no space left for anyone. But the next morning, while changing into my white coat in the doctor's locker room, I found a small folded note in my pocket. "If you change your mind, the coffee won't be hot, but I'll still be waiting." His name and number were written beneath it. Zachary Cole. I didn't text back. Not until a rainy night, when I'd been stuck covering the ER for 20 straight hours and no one showed up to pick me up like they'd promised. I sat alone by the vending machine, staring at a bottle of water like it might offer comfort. And then Zachary showed up, soaked from the rain, holding a box of hot food and a pair of fuzzy slippers. All he said was, "Haha, I figured you forgot what warm feet feel like." From that day on, I started finding small notes in my pockets. "Good luck with the morning shift. Hope all your patients are adorable. Don't forget to eat something before 10. Have you any water yet, Dr. Donovan?" One time, I fell asleep on the phone with him, mid-call. The next morning, I woke up on the sofa with a blanket gently covering me, and a note that read, "You're funny even in your sleep." We didn't fall in love right away. It grew quietly, gently, like the way he patiently waited in his car for me to finish each shift, playing soft music and holding out a cup of hot cocoa for me to sip before saying a word. When I passed my board certification exam and officially became a pediatrician, he took me to the public library, the one where I'd spent many sleepless nights studying. At our usual bench, he got down on one knee and held out a slim white gold ring. No diamonds, just my name engraved on the inside. "Claire Donovan, I don't need a grand promise. I just need to know that when you're tired, you'll still choose to come home." To me, I nodded in silence, not from a surge of emotion, but because I knew. He was home. When his mother died suddenly from a stroke, I was the one who sat by his side in the emergency room for 7 hours. He didn't cry out loud. He just held her cold hand like he was clinging to the rest of his life. After the funeral, he said something I've never forgotten. "You're the only person I trust completely now." We began designing our dream home in a quiet suburb of Brookline. Lightwood floors, large, sun-filled windows in a corner just for the two. Tear bookshelves, because I love children's books. He spent a whole month finding the exact kitchen tile in Seattle fog like I wanted. I picked paint colors for the nursery, even though I wasn't pregnant yet. He picked names, Miles if it was a boy, June if it was a girl, after his mother. Every detail in that house reflected a man who paid attention to what I loved, from the brand of tea I drank to the rocking chair on the balcony, so I could rest while still seeing the sky. We both believed we had found the calmest place in the chaos of life. So when he walked away on our wedding day, I didn't just lose a husband. I lost the belief that love, if deep enough, would never leave. After that night, I tried everything a wife, or someone who still believed she was a wife, could do to find him. I called. He didn't pick up. I texted. No reply. I went to his office. Locked. The staff said he was on an urgent business trip. I contacted his parent company. The manager told me Zachary had filed for indefinite leave the morning after our wedding. The only thing in his email, I need time. Time for what? I went to the house we had designed together. It was still unfinished. No furniture, curtains uninstalled, bedding still sealed in plastic. Everything was halfway, like my life. The oak dining table hadn't even been unboxed. The rocking chair swayed in the wind out on the balcony. No sign he had ever come back. I stood in that unfinished house like a smudged line on paper. Not erased, but never continued. A week later, I went to his mother's house, Mrs. June's. She had no answers for me. All she said was, "Claire, if you need to stay here, treat this place as your home. I don't understand what's happening with him either." Her eyes held a deep sorrow, like she was losing her son all over again. I couldn't cry there, and left. Every trail went cold until one rainy night, I got a call from Ian Keller, Zachary's best friend from college. "Claire, it's Ian. Sorry it's late. But I can't keep this to myself anymore." I sat up straight, my heart pounded. I know I shouldn't be saying this, but that day before he left, Zachary called me. He said one name. I held my breath. He said, "Ava, she's back. Everything's falling apart." The phone nearly slipped from my hand. Ava Whitmore. I had only heard that name once on one of our early dates, when Zachary mentioned a college relationship that ended in tragedy. Ava, the ex-girlfriend who supposedly went missing in a car accident back in 2015. It made the news. There was a funeral. The family confirmed the body. Zachary barely spoke of it. He only said, "She turned left. I didn't." And that was the end. Forever. So how is she back? I stayed up all night digging into anything I could find about Ava. The accident article. It was still online. But when I searched public records for Ava in the Citizen database, the result came back blank. No social security number, no tax records, no bank accounts. As if, after 2015, she had never existed. Zachary's silence began to take shape. I went to the city library archives, where death notices, certificates, and crash reports were stored. One strange detail. In Ava Whitmore's death certificate copy, the field for identification of the body was blurred due to a print error. The section for next of kin contact was also empty. I called an old friend, an investigative journalist for a local paper. She helped me connect with someone who had covered the crash years ago. The call lasted 6 minutes, but the first 10 seconds were enough to chill me to the bone. Ava Whitmore wasn't included in the DNA-confirmed victim list because there was no DNA to match. The body was too badly burned for complete identification, but the family held a funeral anyway because they had complete faith. The exact same words Zachary once said to me at his mother's funeral. And I started to wonder, how many parts of his life were built on that same complete faith? Where I was never allowed to enter. Filed public records requests across multiple states. A week later, a small data entry arrived from an archive office in Wyoming. A newly registered driver's license under the name Ava Marie Whitmore, using a new social security number. Address, Jackson Hole, Wyoming. I printed it out, sat at my kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee, and stared at the line of text. I couldn't believe I was tracking a woman who was supposed to be dead, because she might be the reason my husband walked away on our wedding night. I called Ian again. "Is it possible Zachary was being threatened by her?" I asked. "I don't know, but I've never heard him sound that scared." It was like something had pulled him back into a past he thought he'd escaped. That night, I pulled out a suitcase, packed a few outfits, placed the printed address and some documents into a folder. I wasn't planning a confrontation. I only wanted the truth, even if it was the last thing I was ready to accept. But I didn't go to Wyoming. Even after printing the address, arranging my clothes, being ready to walk right into that town, I didn't leave Boston. After 3 weeks of restless sleep, eating out of obligation, and asking myself what I did wrong, my body began to revolt. I had stomach pain, started losing weight uncontrollably. My skin turned gray despite no sunlight. I still showed up at the hospital every day, still wore my white coat, still placed my stethoscope on the fragile chests of NICU newborns, still answered parents' questions with a calm voice. But I wasn't living. I was surviving. Or more accurately, hiding. Hiding from the question why. Hiding from the wedding music still echoing in my mind every night I lay down. Hiding from the image of Zachary, staring at me with blank eyes, and that sentence I could never explain. I have to go. My friends started to pull away, not out of malice, but helplessness. Jessica, my best friend and maid of honor, came by every day the first week. She brought food, folded my laundry, reminded me to drink water, and told ridiculous stories about her bad dates to try to make me laugh. One day, she sat on the edge of my bed, her voice barely audible. "Claire, if you won't talk, I don't know what else to do." I buried my face in the pillow, silent. She sighed. "You don't have to be okay right now, but you have to let yourself be hurt. Be angry. Be alive. You can't go on like this. A ghost." A few days later, she stopped coming. Zachary's family cut all contact. His mother stopped answering calls. His sister blocked me on social media. His uncle, who used to sip whiskey with me and tell high school stories about Zach, sent me a single email. We asked for privacy during this time. Their privacy? What about my pain? I started imagining that Zachary had been kidnapped. Maybe he'd been forced. Maybe an accident, a conspiracy, an undiagnosed mental illness. I clung to anything that might make what he did forgivable. Until I got a call from the bank. "Hello, Ms. Donovan. We'd like to verify some recent transactions made on a new MasterCard account under your name. Opened on the 17th of last month." "Excuse me?" "I didn't open any new accounts." "Exactly, ma'am. That's why we're calling. It appears the card was opened using one of your older profiles, but the delivery address is a hotel in Montana. I asked for the details. A new credit account. Shipping address? Cabinwood Inn, Livingston, Montana. Recipient name, Zachary Cole." The hotel was a small inn with only 8 rooms. I found the phone number online and called immediately, heart pounding so hard it strangled my voice. "Cabinwood Inn. How may I help you?" I tried to sound calm. "I'd like to confirm whether a Zachary Cole is or was staying there." "I'm his wife." There was a pause. "I'm sorry, we can't release guest information. This is urgent, life or death. Family, I don't even know what I am anymore. I don't know if it was pity or something else." But the receptionist finally exhaled. "There was someone named Zachary Cole here. Room 3. He stayed a week and left last week. Do you know where he went?" "We're not sure, but he didn't leave alone." "What do you mean?" "There was a woman with him. No reservation under her name, but tall brown hair, wore wide-brimmed hats, always had sunglasses on, even indoors." I tried to steady my voice. "Do you know her name?" "Sorry, it's not in our system, but I remember he called her Ava." I put the phone down on the table. My hands shook so much I needed both just to hold my water glass. Zachary wasn't missing. He hadn't been kidnapped. He wasn't mentally unwell. He left, by choice, with Ava, and he used my name, my identity, to pay for his disappearance. I left Boston in early September, carrying 2 suitcases of clothes, a folder of medical records, and a wound that had no name, only the feeling that every time I looked in the mirror, I no longer recognized the person staring back. The Silver Creek Community Health Center sat in a small town in northern Vermont, nestled between pine trees and rolling grassy hills. There were no automatic elevators, no endless white corridors like the big hospitals, just 4 main exam rooms, a shared call room for doctors and nurses, and an old coffee machine that clicked off beat every few seconds. But there, I could breathe. I came in as a pediatrician and child development counselor for low-income families. At first, I thought it would be temporary, a few months to rest, then back to the city. But after the first week, when a 3-year-old boy clung to me because no one reads me books before bed anymore, I knew I was staying. Caleb Morgan was the first to greet me on my first day. Not in a white coat, no name tag. Just a tall, lean man with calm eyes and a kind smile. He showed me the office, explained how to coax the printer when it's moody, and pointed at a worn leather chair. Be careful with that one. It collapses sometimes, but it's loyal. Caleb never asked why a doctor from Boston ended up here. Never probed, never asked about the story behind those tired eyes. He simply left a cup of chamomile tea on my desk after long appointments or held the door when my hands were full of charts. He lived 5 minutes outside town in a 2-story wooden house near the creek. Father to 2 kids, Olivia, 8, obsessed with drawing and endlessly curious, and Henry, 4, who liked to hide toys in his dad's pockets to carry magic with him. They didn't know I came from a broken life. And I didn't tell them. I just worked. Then walked along the creek in the evenings, then ate dinner alone with the sound of wind through wooden window panes. My world shrank down to the second-floor kitchenette at the clinic, where I drank cocoa, reviewed files, and sometimes heard Caleb humming country songs while washing mugs. One day, Olivia fell while running across the schoolyard. It wasn't a serious scratch, but she sobbed like her leg had snapped in half. Caleb carried her into the clinic, and I was the one who cleaned her up. Olivia clutched his hand and yelled, "Dad, are you sure she knows what she's doing?" Caleb laughed, ruffling her hair. "Claire once healed the kind of pain even I couldn't see, sweetheart." I said nothing, kept dabbing the scrape on her knee. But something unfamiliar stirred inside me. We started having lunch together. Not planned, not scheduled, just. When I came downstairs, he was already there, or the other way around. He liked peanut butter and banana sandwiches, which I used to find indigestible but then tried one day and didn't hate it. I liked hot soup, the only thing that made me feel steady when my insides still swayed. Caleb said, "People who've been broken tend to choose soft things, easier to swallow." One late night, Olivia had a high fever. Caleb called me, not as a doctor, but as someone he trusted. I arrived in a wool cardigan carrying a box of meds and a stethoscope. Olivia lay weakly in bed, murmuring a friend's name in her sleep. After giving her the meds, I sat in the living room chair, watching Caleb read under the lamplight beside her. "You're a good mom," I said softly. He looked at me. "I'm not a mom, just a grown-up trying to do the right thing." I meant to laugh, but my throat caught. He noticed. He didn't ask anything. He just placed his hand on the back of the chair, nearly touching my shoulder but never pushing. We weren't in love. But on quiet evenings, when Olivia giggled and Henry sang made-up songs, I'd catch Caleb's gaze. Calm, unhurried, but enough to let me know, if I wanted, I could stop running. After 2 years in Silver Creek, I stopped counting the days. I moved into Caleb's house on a spring morning. It wasn't a grand move. No ceremony, no truck. Only a few boxes of books, a lavender plant in a tin bucket, and a quiet question as he rinsed the plates. "If I bring over all these files, would you kick me out?" He smiled, wiped his hands on a dish towel, and kissed my forehead. "As long as you don't bring 3 more broken coffee makers." So I stayed. No announcements, no fanfare. But the kids understood. Henry, 6 at the time, told his classmates, "My dad has a new wife, but they're waiting for a dinosaur cake to get married." He and Olivia, 10 now, sharp and thoughtful, once called me mom while half asleep during a fever. I stood by her bed, still holding a warm cloth, unsure if I heard it right. The next morning, when I brought it up, she shrugged. "I know my real mom's gone, but if the new mom makes chicken soup and reads every word in the book, she probably counts." Caleb heard it, didn't say a word. But that night, he left a note on the dinner table. "Thank you for not walking away, even when you had every reason to." Our engagement took place in the backyard. No white dress, no diamond ring. Just about 10 people, some close coworkers, neighbors, the kids, and a blooming apple tree. Caleb built the bamboo arch himself. Henry snuck in green twinkle lights to make it magic. I wore a simple green dress, braided my hair, and held a bouquet of wildflowers Olivia picked that morning. Oh, speeches. No one needed to say anything. It was all there, in every glance. Afterward, when the guests had gone, I sat with Olivia on the back steps. She leaned her head on my shoulder, our fingers interlaced. "Are you scared, Mom, before you decided to stay with us?" I looked out at the pines. Yes, very scared, but I was tired of walking without knowing where I was going. She nodded slowly. I was scared too, but Dad said, "It's not as bad if you're scared together." I thought everything had finally settled, that the past, after all this time, had stopped trying to intrude on the life I'd rebuilt, piece by fragile piece. But then, on a Thursday afternoon in late fall, I came home to find Caleb standing on the porch with a worn package in his hand. Someone left this at the door. No return address. I took it. A soft, old cardboard box, sealed with faded tape. On the top, just one line in bold pen. Slanted handwriting I knew too well. "Claire, if you still want to know." I brought it into the kitchen, hands trembling slightly. Caleb didn't ask. He just placed 2 cups of tea on the table and sat beside me. I opened the box. The first thing inside was a handwritten letter. The paper yellowed like it had been written long ago. I recognized the handwriting instantly. Neat. Measured. A bit rigid. Just like everything Zachary did. "Claire, if you're reading this, it means I didn't have the courage to hand it to you myself. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I just want to leave you with what you deserve. The truth. Not about leaving, but about why I didn't dare come back." I swallowed hard and turned the pages. Underneath the letter was a sealed envelope with the Massachusetts General Hospital logo. I recognized the format immediately. A biopsy result. Inside, stamped in red, were the words, "Adenocarcinoma, stage 4. Attached was a CT scan of the abdomen. The black and white images clearly showed a tumor surrounding the pancreas, a textbook case of late-stage pancreatic cancer. I didn't need the last line of the letter. I lived with mistakes, but I don't want to die in silence. Caleb didn't ask. He simply placed his hand over mine. Steady, quiet, the kind of gesture that said more than words ever could. No explanations needed. No defense. I folded the letter carefully, then stood to get my coat. I had never planned to go back, but some doors, if you don't close them yourself, will keep the wind howling through your life forever. I arrived at the hospice on a Saturday afternoon. The sky was gray, like a soft cloth had been draped over the world. It wasn't raining, the wind had stilled, but that October chill, the kind that doesn't sting only awakens what we thought we'd buried, was everywhere. Zachary was in room 12, second floor, at the end of the hallway. The door was ajar. I pushed it gently and stepped into the small room, lit by artificial light. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic, mixed with dried lavender hanging near the window. He lay there, gaunt, pale, the skin around his eyes sunken. But his eyes? They were still the same. The ones I had once known, once loved, once thought I'd look into for the rest of my life. When I stepped in, he turned his head. When he saw me, his lips trembled, then curved into a faint, tired smile. "I didn't think you'd come." I pulled the chair closer, but didn't speak right away. He breathed slowly, closing his eyes for a few seconds as if gathering the last bit of strength he had left. "I know you don't owe me anything," he whispered. "Not a visit. Not even a goodbye. But if you still want to understand, just a little, I'll tell you everything." Zachary inhaled deeply. His voice was hoarse, weak, but each word came through clearly. Ava didn't die. That accident? It wasn't random. She used to be involved with a money laundering group that posed as a public art foundation. I once signed off on one of their project designs fresh out of school, not knowing what was behind it. When it all fell apart, Ava faked her death to escape, and I thought it was over. He paused, coughed lightly. I poured him water and held the cup out. His fingers trembled as they brushed mine. Then, a month before the wedding, she came back. Not to threaten, but to warn me. Some of the old players were planning to stir things up again to scare the new ones. Ava said if I didn't help calm it down, they'd go after what I cared about most. I clenched my hands tightly. On the wedding day, Ava sent me copies of the old documents, along with one line, "If she ever finds out, she won't live in peace." I was going to tell you, after the reception, I swear, but when I saw you walk into that ballroom, smiling, greeting our families, I couldn't. So you chose to walk away without a word? Zachary lowered his head. I chose cowardice, thinking it might keep you safe. At least that's what I told myself. In that moment, all the years of pain cracked open. Not in anger, but in a kind of exhaustion that went straight to the soul. Zachary looked at me, not pleading, but like a man who once held light in his hands and dropped it. Not hoping to get it back. Only hoping to touch it one last time. Ava's gone. Last year. Cancer. Same kind as mine. And you? The liver metastasis, the doctor says, could be a few months, could be a few weeks. How long were you with her? 2 years, but not the way you think. There wasn't love, just two people with the same fear clinging to each other to stay afloat. I turned away. Then why now? Why send a letter? Why call me here? His voice shook. Because? I'm dying. And you're the one thing I never had the courage to face. I took a breath. The room suddenly felt smaller, as if the beeping heart monitor and his shallow breaths were the only sounds that existed. Zachary kept speaking, this time without looking at me. His eyes fixed on the white ceiling. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect you to come back. I just want you to know. The one thing I held on to, all this time, was the image of you in that dress. Walking toward me, eyes lit like the world only had the two of us. I bit my lip. My eyes stung, but the tears never fell. I'm no longer the woman in that dress. No. And you don't need to be. You deserve to be whoever you choose to become. Thank you for coming, so I won't die with words still buried inside me. I didn't know if it was an ending or a very quiet beginning, but for the first time since he left, I could look at him without feeling torn apart by the question, why? I returned to the hospice the next morning, carrying a box of chamomile tea and a few slim books about planets, something Zachary used to love back in college. I didn't know exactly why I'd brought them. Maybe because I still remembered how he used to whisper to me after long overnight shift. If there's another life, I want to be an astronomer. At least stars don't betray each other. Zachary wasn't strong enough to read anymore, but when I opened the books and read aloud, my voice steady and warm, he tilted his head like he was listening to every word. I didn't feel like I was forgiving. I just didn't want to carry bitterness into the life I was now living. Well, I stayed by his side every day. Caleb would drop by occasionally. He never came into the room, just left coffee in the hallway with a quick note. The sun's out a little today. Olivia and I will be home if you need silence to return to. I used to fear that Caleb wouldn't understand, but his silence? Exactly the kind, at exactly the right time. Let me know I didn't need permission to process old grief with kindness. On the 5th day, I arrived earlier than usual. The night nurse told me Zachary had barely slept. He was weaker. I entered the room, turned on the instrumental version of Clair de Lune, his favorite piano piece. He couldn't speak anymore, but his fingers twitched lightly as if trying to reach for the melody. I sat beside him, holding his hand. For the first time since he left, we said nothing, and when his breath grew slower, I leaned in and whispered, not because I knew he could still hear me, but because I needed to say it. I didn't forget, but I've learned how not to hurt from it anymore. Thank you for letting me move forward. A single tear slipped down his cheek. His hand clutched a small letter he had held onto in those final days, so tightly that I had to gently pry each finger loose to take it. I didn't cry. Tears didn't feel like the right language to say goodbye to someone who had once been everything and was now simply a part of a memory that shouldn't be erased. That night, I sat on the living room sofa, Caleb beside me, one arm around my shoulders gently, like always. I opened Zachary's final letter. The handwriting was shaky, uneven, the paper smudged at the corners. I couldn't tell if it was sweat, medication, or tears. Claire, I once hoped I'd live long enough to explain everything, but sometimes explanations don't come from time. They come from courage. Thank you for living well, even when I didn't deserve it. You did what I was never strong enough to do. Keep treating the world with kindness, even after it broke you completely. I don't ask to be remembered as a husband or even a former love. I only hope that in your memory, I'm not the one who made you lose faith in everything. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just that you keep the best years and let the rest drift away, like wind through an old season. Caleb quietly took the letter, folded it gently and placed it in the small wooden box Olivia once used to collect colored stones by the creek. He turned to me, eyes meeting mine. He didn't rush to ask, "Are you okay?" Because he knew I didn't need that. What I needed was someone patient enough to sit beside me in the dark, on the nights I still didn't know who I was becoming. I leaned my head on his shoulder, quietly. Outside the window, wind stirred the small string lights along the porch. An owl called in the distance. Moonlight reflected faintly off the shingles. And something in me held tight for so long, finally let go. Not to disappear, not to drift away, but to no longer weigh me down. I returned to Montana at the end of winter, when the snow had begun to melt and little drops of water tapped down from the eaves like spring knocking at the door. Same wooden house by the creek. Same lights Olivia had hung on frayed rope. Same door that creaked when it opened. But everything felt different. Not because I'd forgotten, but because I had stopped holding on. Zachary was no longer the name that made my chest tighten when I heard it. He was simply a part of the long story I had once walked through, like a stretch of dark forest I got lost in. And now, I had stepped back into the light. We held the wedding on a Sunday morning by the creek where Caleb and I often took the kids to play. No church, no formal wear, no organ music, just the sound of water running and wind rustling through tall pine branches. Olivia scattered flower petals along the path. No ornate aisle, only a path the children's feet already knew by heart. Henry darted around excitedly, asking over and over, "Mom, is it time for the forever promise yet?" I laughed. The way children name grown-up rituals always made me feel lighter. I wore a cream dress so simple no one would have guessed it was a wedding gown. Caleb wore a linen shirt, sleeves rolled, eyes following my every move like he still couldn't believe this day had really come. The officiant was a retired doctor who used to work at the clinic, now our neighbor and Caleb's fishing buddy. He opened with a line that made the whole gathering laugh. "Marriage isn't a destination. It's a pair of sturdy shoes. If they fit, you'll go far. If they don't, every step will make you wince." He held my hand gently, firmly, and in that moment I wasn't thinking of the past or any other name. I was fully present. We didn't exchange poetic vows. We simply said what we had already lived over the past 2 years. I promise not to try to be perfect, just patient, honest, and if you forget to wash your coffee mug for 3 days straight, I'll still love you. After one last grimace, I promise to always ask, "Are you okay?" Even when you say, "I'm fine," I promise to remember. The woman standing before me was once left behind and still chose to believe in love again. We kissed by the creek. Instead of fireworks or applause, there was only a breeze over the grass and the soft scent of apple pie floating through the trees. A few weeks later, I began to write again. Not a journal, but a book. Not quite a memoir, but honest enough for anyone who'd ever been left to find themselves in it. The working title? After They Never Came Back. I wrote in the early mornings, before the kids woke, as the first sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, stretching long across the wooden table. I wrote about the things no one says at weddings. That love isn't always enough to make someone stay. That silence can hurt more than goodbye. That women don't have to be strong right away. They need to not fall completely. Caleb didn't ask much about the manuscript. He simply placed a mug of coffee next to me each morning. Perfect temperature, exactly how I liked it. And occasionally left little notes. "You're writing what others haven't dared to name. Keep going." One day, Olivia walked into the office while I was editing chapter 23. "Are you writing about something sad, Mom?" "Yeah, about the kind of sadness I once thought I'd never get out of." She thought for a while, then asked, "Action. But did you ever get out?" "Not out. I learned to live with it and still move forward." Olivia nodded, then said, "Like a little philosopher. Like when I was sad because real mom was really gone, but there's new mom now who makes pancakes?" I laughed and pulled her close. No one teaches children how to name emotions, but they always seem to know how to express them in the language that cuts straight to the heart. The sky that day was clear like crystal. The lake still, so still it seemed even the pine trees mirrored on its surface had stopped breathing. Said Foy, "We held the celebration by the lake." It wasn't called a wedding anymore, because everyone there knew. We'd been a family for a long time, but today was a chance to raise a glass, not for a beginning, but to honor a road already walked with courage. I stood on the lawn, my ivory dress swaying lightly in the breeze, surrounded by friends, coworkers, neighbors, people who had seen me fall quietly and slowly rise again. Caleb remained close, his presence steady without a word, his hand resting gently on my back like a silent reminder. "You don't have to carry this alone anymore. They've seen it, and you're still here." I lifted my glass and stepped onto a flat stone by the water's edge so everyone could see. Olivia tugged at my dress from behind, her eyes shimmering like the lake. Henry held a bunch of wild grass, eyes locked on a dragonfly perched on his father's sleeve. Someone once asked why I'd want to host this kind of gathering. They said you're already together, you've made it through the storms, you have a home, kids, peace. What more do you need? I looked around, meeting each gaze. Too, I think we don't have events like this to mark a milestone. We have them to quietly acknowledge. We've been through more than most people realize, and we're still here. I saw a few heads nod. People who had lost husbands, wives, who had raised children alone, who had cried in the kitchen while the world partied outside. I was once left at my own wedding, not because I wasn't enough, not because I did something wrong, but because the person I loved carried a weight I couldn't take on. I waited for an explanation that never came, and when it finally did, I didn't need it anymore. I turned to Caleb, the man who never asked, who broke you, but simply said, "What do you need to heal?" Life doesn't ask if we're ready. It only asks, "Will you keep going?" Not alone, but with what's left in your heart and someone quiet enough to walk beside you without interrupting. Olivia clapped first, a small, short clap that quickly spread around the tables. Caleb squeezed my hand and whispered, "Own, you have no idea. You just spoke for dozens of people." When the party ended, I wandered barefoot through the grass, holding my heels, letting my feet touch the soft earth. An older neighbor pressed an apple pie into my hands and said, "Sweetheart, I wish I'd heard those words from your mother's mouth years ago." I smiled, hugged her. Caleb sat with Henry, pointing to each star as it blinked into the twilight. Olivia stood beside me, resting her hand naturally on my waist, whispering, "Mom, did you write a part in your book for moms who got left behind?" I tilted my head, smiling at her. I did, but I wrote even more for the ones who chose not to stay victims forever. She furrowed her brow, thoughtful, then nodded slowly. "Then you wrote it for Mom." I squeezed her shoulder gently. "No, sweetheart. I wrote it for everyone who once thought they were the ones left behind, but later realized they were the ones who got to stay. Stay with life, with kindness, and with a future still worth living. Maybe you've never been left at the altar, but maybe you've been left behind in a half-finished plan, a promise that was never kept, or simply forgotten in a relationship you gave everything to. If that ever happened to you, what did you choose to do? Did you walk on in silence? Or are you still waiting for an explanation from the past? I don't have the right answer. I just know this. We all deserve to be loved, not because we're perfect, but because we're brave enough not to give up on kindness, even after we've been left behind. If today's story reminded you of yourself or someone you once knew, share your thoughts in the comments. I'll read them, and who knows? Maybe the next story begins with something you write. Don't forget to follow this channel so you won't miss the journeys of healing, rebirth, and reclaiming the meaning of family. The small things that, in the end, keep us closest to one another in this life. Because sometimes one story is enough to help someone believe they still have a chance to begin again.